The valley was unnervingly quiet. Too quiet. The only sounds were the rhythmic hum of the convoy engines and the crunch of gravel beneath their armored tires. Heat shimmered off the rocky cliffs, turning the air into a wavering mirage. Dust trailed behind the line of vehicles like smoke from an unseen fire. Every soldier in that convoy, though weary from long hours on the road, felt the tension pressing on them. It was the kind of silence that made seasoned veterans grip their rifles a little tighter. Sergeant Elena Martinez, the unit's communications officer, sat in the back of the second Humvee, her head set snug against her ears. Her eyes scanned the barren cliffs above, though she saw little more than stone and shadow. She had learned early in her deployments to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts whispered danger. The lieutenant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Eyes up, everyone. Stay sharp." No one needed the reminder. This valley was known for ambush narrow, winding, with plenty of ridges where enemy fighters could hide. But orders were orders, and they had to pass through. The first blast came without warning. A deafening roar split the air as an IED buried beneath the dirt erupted beneath the lead vehicle. The explosion sent fire and steel into the sky, flipping the armored truck like a toy. The shockwave rattled Elena's chest, knocking the breath from her lungs. Her Humvee screeched to a halt as soldiers shouted over one another, instincts clashing with training. Before anyone could react, gunfire poured down from the ridges. Dozens of muzzle flashes lit up the cliffs like fireworks, the staccato bursts echoing across the valley. Bullets pinged against metal, shattered windshields, and tore into the dirt with deadly force. Contact! Contact! Someone screamed. Elena ducked instinctively, pressing her back against the steel interior of the Humvee. Her heart pounded against her ribs, a drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. The acrid stench of burning fuel filled the air as flames engulfed the wrecked lead vehicle. Through the smoke, she saw soldiers scrambling for cover, some firing blindly toward the ridges, others dragging the wounded. The world had transformed in an instant. Moments ago, they were just a convoy moving cautiously through a quiet valley. Now they were prey trapped in a kill zone. A second explosion tore through the third vehicle in line. Shrapnel rained down like knives, clanging against Elena's helmet. The Humvee rocked violently, throwing her against the door. Pain flared in her side, but she forced herself upright. "Martinez, it on comes." The lieutenant barked from the front. Her hand instinctively reached for her radio pack, but before she could activate it, another blast rocked the ground beneath her. This one was closer too close. The force threw her across the cabin. Her head slammed against the doorframe, and the world spun violently. When she tried to stand, a scream tore from her throat before she could stop it. Her legs buckled beneath her. She looked down and saw the unnatural angle of her knees, blood soaking into the fabric of her uniform. Shards of metal glistened in the flesh. Her stomach lurched. She had seen injuries before, many worse than her own, but the reality of it, her legs. Her blood hit her like a wave of nausea. For a second, she couldn't breathe. The pain was blinding, searing through her nerves with every heartbeat. She collapsed back to the dirt floor of the Humvee, gasping for air. Around her, chaos raged. The lieutenant shouted orders she could barely make out through the ringing in her ears. Gunfire thundered from every direction. The smell of burning rubber and diesel grew stronger, mixing with the metallic tang of blood. Somewhere outside, a soldier screamed, a raw, desperate sound that cut through the storm of noise. Another voice yelled, "Man down! Man down!" Elena tried to push herself upright again, but her legs betrayed her, refusing to hold her weight. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony coursing through her. She clenched her teeth, biting back another scream. She was a soldier. She couldn't afford to give in. Her gaze shifted to the communications pack, lying a few feet away on the floor of the Humvee. It might as well have been a mile. Her fingers twitched toward it instinctively. That radio was more than a piece of equipment. It was the lifeline of the entire unit. Reinforcements, medevacs, air support, all of it depended on her reaching that device. She heard the lieutenant again, his voice hoarse but commanding. "We're pinned down. We need air support now." But without her, there would be no call. Elena's chest tightened. Fear, pain, and the crushing weight of responsibility collided in her mind. She looked around at the soldiers fighting desperately, each one relying on her to do her job. 40 lives were balanced on a razor's edge, and she was the one who had to tip the scale. Her instincts screamed at her to crawl, to reach that pack no matter the cost. But her body screamed louder, begging her to stay down, to let someone else handle it. Except there was no one else. Bullets tore through the air above, chipping the Humvee's armor. Dust filled her mouth, choking her as she tried to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled, slick with blood. "You can't stop now," she told herself. "Not here, not like this." She dragged in a shaky breath, wincing at the pain. Her legs were shattered, her body broken, but her spirit was not. And so, in the heart of that ambush, with fire and death surrounding her, Sergeant Elena Martinez made a silent vow. She would not quit. Not until she reached that radio. Not until she gave her unit a fighting chance to survive. The battlefield roared on, unforgiving and merciless, as Elena braced her hands against the dirt and prepared to crawl. The first thing Elena Martinez registered was the taste of iron in her mouth. She coughed, spitting blood into the dirt, her vision clouded by smoke and dust. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning rubber and scorched metal, each breath clawing down her throat. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she was alive or dead. Then the pain hit. It came like a wave, raw and merciless, radiating from her legs into every fiber of her body. Her nerves screamed, a relentless fire tearing through her veins. She had been trained to handle pain cuts, burns, the occasional broken bone, but this was different. This was annihilation. Her knees bent at unnatural angles, the fabric of her uniform soaked in crimson. Jagged fragments of shrapnel protruded from her thighs, glinting under the haze of battle. The shock nearly consumed her. A strangled sob escaped her lips as she clutched at the earth, trying to ground herself against the agony. For an instant, she allowed the thought, "This is it. I'm finished." But soldiers don't get to finish. Not while the fight still rages. Gunfire raked the ground near her, showering her with dirt and rock fragments. Somewhere to her left, a fellow soldier screamed, his voice raw with terror. The chaos outside wasn't waiting for her to recover. Time was a luxury they didn't have. Elena forced herself to breathe, slow and ragged, steadying her spinning mind. She'd seen injuries like hers before, in others men and women pulled from burning vehicles, bodies broken beyond recognition. She had watched medics work frantically to save them, sometimes succeeding, sometimes not. But she had never imagined being on the receiving end, feeling every nerve ablaze while the battlefield carried on without mercy. She tried to move. The attempt was pathetic, a twitch of her hips and a push from her trembling arms. White-hot pain surged through her legs, forcing a scream that tore from her throat before she could stop it. Her vision went white at the edges, her ears filled with the thunder of her own heartbeat. "Sergeant Martinez." A voice yelled from outside, though she couldn't see who. "Stay down. Stay with us." She wanted to reply, to reassure them, but her mouth felt full of ash. The only answer she could give was a groan, half-choked, as she collapsed back against the scorched floor of the Humvee. Her eyes fell again on the communications pack, lying yards away, just out of reach. The black box sat innocently in the dirt, antenna bent but still intact, lights faintly blinking. It might as well have been glowing gold. That pack wasn't just her duty, it was their salvation. Without it, they were blind. Without it, 40 soldiers were trapped in a killing ground with no hope of extraction. The weight of that truth pressed on her chest harder than any injury. She could see the rest of her squad pinned down outside the vehicles, returning fire desperately against an enemy hidden in the ridges. Every second wasted meant more bullets, more bodies, more blood. And she was lying here, broken, staring at the one thing that could change their fate. Her mind wavered between two realities, the searing immediacy of her pain and the cold, rational knowledge that pain meant nothing if they all died. Elena clenched her jaw, summoning fragments of memory from training. She remembered her drill sergeant's voice, barking across a scorching field years ago. Pain is temporary. Mission is everything. Your body will lie to you, but your will decides. Her will. That was all she had left. Another explosion detonated at the edge of the convoy, sending shockwaves through the ground. Dust and smoke engulfed her, stinging her eyes. Through the haze, she glimpsed the lieutenant crouched behind the remains of the lead vehicle, firing bursts into the ridges while shouting into his hand mic. But she knew it was futile. The signal from those handhelds couldn't break through the valley walls. Their only chance rested with her. A fresh burst of enemy fire rattled the Humvee, bullets tearing through its armor like angry hornets. The vehicle groaned under the assault, its protective shell weakening. She couldn't stay here. If she didn't move, the next barrage might end her before she even tried. Her pulse hammered, her mind wrestling with two brutal truths. Her body couldn't carry her, but the mission demanded she move anyway. She shifted her weight onto her elbows, teeth grinding so hard she thought they might break. The effort alone sent pain searing up her spine, but she forced herself to continue. Her arms trembled under the burden, her body screaming betrayal, but her will clung to a single command: reach the pack. Reach it, or they all die. Sweat mixed with blood on her face, dripping into her eyes. The ground beneath her was rough, scraping against her palms, yet she pressed forward another inch. Her legs dragged uselessly behind her, limp and mangled. The sight of them nearly broke her spirit. How could something so broken still belong to her? She refused to look again. She couldn't. Every crawl was an eternity. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale a battle against the weight crushing her chest. She was moving, yes, but the distance seemed endless, cruelly stretching before her. And yet she was moving. That mattered. That meant hope. Bullets whined overhead, some striking so close she felt the vibration through the ground. Voices shouted around her, comrades giving cover, others crying out in pain. She wanted to help them all, to be everywhere at once, but she knew her duty had narrowed to this single, agonizing crawl. Her fingers clawed at the dirt, pulling her forward, leaving streaks of blood in her wake. Each pull was a defiance of death, a refusal to surrender. "Come on, Martinez," she whispered hoarsely to herself, her voice nearly lost in the roar of battle. Just a little more. The pack was still ahead, still unreachable, but it was closer. Every inch meant survival. Every inch meant she was still in the fight. And in that brutal valley, beneath fire and smoke, Sergeant Elena Martinez realized the cruelest truth of war. Sometimes courage wasn't about standing tall. Sometimes it was about refusing to quit, even when crawling was all you had left. And crawl she would. The battlefield had become a furnace of noise and fury. Gunfire crackled like endless thunder, explosions shook the ground, and screams rose above the chaos before being swallowed by the roar of war. Dust stung Elena's eyes as she pressed her palms into the dirt, forcing her body forward. Her legs trailed uselessly behind her, a cruel reminder of the blast that had taken her mobility. Every nerve in her body begged for mercy. Pain burned through her like wildfire, relentless and consuming, but pain was no longer the enemy. Surrender was. She could almost hear her father's voice in her memory, the same voice that had pushed her through childhood trials. Martinez, you don't stop just because it hurts. You stop when the job is done. Her job wasn't done, not even close. With trembling arms, she dragged herself another few inches. The rough earth tore at her palms, grinding grit into the cuts on her hands. Sweat and blood mingled, soaking her uniform. Her helmet sat crooked on her head, the chin strap loose, but she didn't bother adjusting it. Every ounce of energy had to go toward forward motion. Martinez, stay down. A soldier shouted from behind cover, firing in quick bursts toward the ridges. His voice cracked with desperation, as though begging her to stop this madness. But Elena didn't look back. She couldn't. If she stopped, even for a moment, doubt would creep in. Doubt was deadlier than any bullet. The radio pack lay ahead, still a cruel distance away. Its antenna glimmered faintly through the haze of smoke. She locked her eyes on it, treating it like a lighthouse in a storm. Bullets snapped into the dirt around her, sending tiny geysers of dust into her face. She blinked furiously, coughing, but kept crawling. Each arm pull was a battle, her muscles trembling with exhaustion. Her legs dragged heavily, useless and bleeding, leaving a red trail behind her. She gritted her teeth, forcing her body to obey. One pull at a time. Don't think about the distance. Just move. Another explosion rocked the valley, this one closer than before. The shockwave rippled through the earth, slamming her chest into the ground. She gasped, choking on the dust. Her ears rang, and for a terrifying second, she thought she had gone deaf. But then the sounds returned, the chaos, the shouting, the relentless staccato of gunfire. Through the ringing, she caught fragments of voices. We're pinned down. We can't hold much longer. Where the hell is support? Her chest tightened. They were holding out for her, for the call she hadn't made yet. Every passing second meant fewer soldiers alive when reinforcements finally arrived. The weight of that truth bore down on her shoulders, heavier than any rucksack she'd carried in training. Keep moving, Elena. Her arms screamed in protest, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but she dragged herself forward again. She imagined the faces of her comrades, men and women she had trained with, laughed with, fought alongside. Their lives were in her hands now, and she refused to let them slip away. Her vision blurred as sweat dripped into her eyes. She shook her head, blinking furiously. She couldn't afford to lose sight of the radio. It was closer now, but still out of reach. She paused, chest heaving, forehead pressed into the dirt. For a heartbeat, doubt tried to crawl in again. What if you don't make it? What if you collapse here, broken and useless? The thought stabbed at her, but she crushed it with sheer willpower. Not today, she whispered to herself, her voice raw and hoarse. Not while they need me. Her words became a rhythm, a mantra to push through the torment. Not today. Not today. Not today, she crawled. Her comrades noticed. From behind cover, soldiers peeked over barriers of twisted metal and burning debris, their eyes widening as they watched her drag herself across the kill zone. Some shouted encouragement between bursts of fire. You got this, Martinez. Keep going. Almost there. Their voices fueled her. Every shout was a spark, igniting her determination. She wasn't just crawling for herself anymore. She was crawling for them. A bullet pinged off the Humvee just feet away, showering her with sparks. She flinched, but didn't stop. Fear had become a constant companion, one she had learned to ignore. Courage, she realized, wasn't about the absence of fear. It was about refusing to yield while fear clawed at you. She remembered the words from training. Words barked into her ears until they were etched into her bones. Mission first, always. Her mission was simple, brutal, and clear. Reach the radio. The pack loomed larger now, just a few arms' lengths away. Her heart pounded harder, adrenaline surging as hope flickered to life. She stretched one hand forward, fingers brushing against the dirt just short of the handle. "Come on," she hissed through clenched teeth. Summoning the last reserves of her strength, she dug her elbows into the ground and pulled with everything she had. Pain erupted through her arms, but she ignored it. She stretched again, her fingers grazing the edge of the pack this time. Almost there. Behind her, the firefight raged on. Soldiers shouted, bullets screamed, explosions shook the valley. But for Elena, the world had narrowed to a single focus, the black radio pack just within her reach. One more pull, one more inch, and she would have it. The world had narrowed into a tunnel of smoke, fire, and desperation. Sergeant Elena Martinez clawed at the dirt with bloody hands, dragging her broken body forward inch by inch. Her breath came in jagged bursts, each one filled with the taste of iron and dust. She had stopped feeling her legs long ago. Only the raw ache of absence remained, as if they no longer belonged to her. Above her, the ridgelines blazed with muzzle flashes. Enemy fighters rained down fire without mercy, their gunshots stitching lines of death across the valley floor. Bullets struck so close she felt the vibration ripple through the earth. Rock shards cut into her arms, peppering her skin, but she barely flinched anymore. Pain was constant, relentless, almost background noise now. The radio pack loomed closer, so close she could almost touch it, but every inch forward felt like a lifetime. Her arms trembled violently, muscles screaming for release. She wanted nothing more than to collapse, to lie down and let the storm of battle wash over her. But the cries of her comrades kept her alive, kept her moving. "Cover fire! Cover fire!" A soldier bellowed. His voice cracked with exhaustion, desperation barely concealed. Another shouted, "We're running low on ammo." The words pierced Elena like arrows. They couldn't hold out much longer. If she failed, if she stopped here, 40 soldiers would die in this cursed valley. That thought alone steeled her resolve. She pressed her palms deeper into the soil, dragging herself another foot. Her fingernails split, dirt grinding into the wounds, but she didn't stop. The earth beneath her smelled of oil and blood. Her uniform was torn and caked in mud, sticking to her skin like a second layer of armor. A bullet struck the ground inches from her head, showering her in burning fragments of stone. She froze instinctively, heart hammering. For a moment, her courage wavered. She was crawling across open ground, exposed, broken, moving too slow. How had she not been killed already? "Because you're not meant to die here," she told herself. Not yet. She forced her arms forward again, dragging her body like dead weight. Sweat dripped from her brow, stinging her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked furiously, refusing to lose sight of her target. The radio's antenna poked up through the smoke like a beacon. Another explosion rocked the valley, sending a wave of heat and pressure over her. She pressed her face into the dirt as debris clattered around her. Something heavy landed inches from her arm-jagged shrapnel, still hot enough to scorch the ground. The smell of burnt flesh filled her nose, and for a moment she gagged. She clenched her teeth, forcing down the nausea. This was no place for weakness. Her comrades' voices rose again, shouting in unison as they tried to repel the assault. Their rifles barked, their determination fierce, but she could hear the fatigue in every shot. They were holding on by threads, waiting for her to stitch those threads into hope. Martinez, move. Someone yelled, though their voice was raw, nearly drowned by the chaos. She didn't know who it was, but the urgency in their tone carried her forward. Her arms screamed, every muscle fiber burning as though set on fire. Her lungs begged for rest, but she ignored them. She imagined herself not as a broken body, but as a machine, one purpose, one function: crawl. 1 inch, 1 breath, 1 heartbeat at a time. She pressed on. The ground beneath her shifted from soft dirt to jagged rock. Each pole scraped her arms, cutting deeper into the skin. Blood smeared across the stone, marking her path like a trail of sacrifice. Still, she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her vision flickered at the edges, darkness threatening to close in. She fought against it, blinking hard, whispering to herself, "Stay awake. Stay alive. Keep moving." Through the haze, she caught a glimpse of the lieutenant's silhouette. He crouched behind a smoking vehicle, rifle in hand, shouting orders into his useless mic. His face was grim, lined with desperation. He didn't know she was almost there, that hope was crawling toward them through the dirt and blood. Her fingers brushed against the radio pack. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it, that it was a hallucination born from exhaustion. But no, it was real. Her fingertips grazed the cold metal, sending a spark of triumph through her battered body. She collapsed forward, cheek pressing into the pack, chest heaving with ragged breaths. She had reached it. But reaching wasn't enough. She needed to activate it. Her hands shook violently as she fumbled with the straps, blood slicking her grip. The battlefield thundered around her, the cries of her comrades echoing in her ears. Every second she wasted was another soldier lost. Her will screamed louder than the pain. Get it working. Now, she pulled the pack closer, dragging it beneath her chest for cover. The antenna bent further, but the lights still blinked faintly. Relief surged through her, damaged, but functional. "Almost there," she whispered, her voice a broken rasp. "Almost?" But even as she reached for the controls, another volley of gunfire whipped through the Humvee behind her, sending shards of metal whistling past her face. A battlefield was reminding her there was no safety yet, no time for rest. She had crawled against death itself, and now the real fight was about to begin. Elena Martinez lay sprawled across the dirt, her body trembling with exhaustion. The black communications pack rested beneath her chest, its scratched metal digging into her ribs. The antenna was bent, one of the indicator lights flickering weakly like a dying heartbeat. It looked as battered as she felt, but it was still there, still alive. And so was she. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she tried to steady the pack. Blood coated her palms, making every grip slippery, clumsy. She wiped them against her uniform, smearing dark stains across the faded fabric. It didn't help much. Her arms felt like lead, her shoulders burning from the relentless crawl that had brought her here. Above her, the battlefield still roared. Muzzle flashes lit up the ridgelines. The sharp cracks of rifles cut through the air, mingling with the booming echoes of explosions. The screams of wounded soldiers rose like sirens, followed by shouted commands and desperate calls for medics. Every sound reminded her of the clock ticking down. 40 lives were balanced on this fragile moment. Her lips were cracked, her throat raw from smoke and grit, but she forced her voice steady as she whispered to herself, "Come on, Elena. Focus. Do your job." With painstaking care, she flipped open the control panel. The hinge was stiff, bent by the blast, but it yielded under her trembling fingers. Static hissed faintly from the headset, thin but unmistakable. A spark of hope surged in her chest. The system was alive. Now came the hard part. She pressed the transmitter button, and the radio crackled weakly. Hiss. This is Sergeant Martinez, she rasped, her voice hoarse, nearly swallowed by the surrounding chaos. She coughed, spat blood into the dirt, and tried again, louder this time. This is Sergeant Elena Martinez, United States Army, Unit Designation Bravo 2. We are under heavy fire. Coordinates. Her vision blurred, but she forced her eyes to focus on the map display strapped to her chest rig. Numbers swam before her, but she recited them with precision, drilled into her by years of training. I repeat, requesting immediate air support at grid reference Alpha 9 or 7. Heavy casualties. Enemy entrenched on high ridges, multiple positions. We need support now. Static swallowed her words, buzzing like a swarm of angry bees. Panic stabbed at her chest. What if the antenna's too damaged? What if the signal won't carry? She adjusted the pack, turning it slightly, angling the bent antenna toward the open sky. Her breath caught as the static softened, replaced by a faint, distant voice. Copy, Martinez. Say again. Relief nearly broke her. She pressed the button again, forcing her voice past the dryness of her throat. This is Martinez. Bravo 2 under attack. 40 personnel engaged. We need immediate support. Enemy has the high ground. Gunfire rattled dangerously close. Bullets tore chunks from the dirt, just inches from her head, spraying her with grit. She flinched, but kept talking, shielding the pack with her body as if it were a child. Repeat. Immediate support. Airstrike required. Multiple casualties. Do you copy? For a moment, only static answered. Her heart sank. Her strength faltered. She had crawled, bled, nearly died to reach this point. Was it all for nothing? Then the voice came again, clearer this time. Copy, Bravo 2. Air support en route. Hold your position. 8 to 7 minutes. Stay alive. 7 minutes. To most, it would sound like salvation. To Elena, it felt like eternity. Her chest heaved, a sob of relief escaping her lips. Tears stung her eyes, though whether from smoke or raw emotion, she didn't know. She had done it. Against every obstacle, she had gotten the call through. But the battle wasn't finished. The lieutenant's voice boomed nearby, hoarse but commanding. You heard her. Support's coming, hold this line. His words ignited the weary soldiers, their gunfire intensifying as they fought to survive just a few more minutes. Elena clutched the radio pack tightly, her trembling body pressed low to the ground. She repeated the coordinates, confirmed the request, kept the line alive despite the chaos. Every transmission was a lifeline, a tether between her broken body in the valley and the thunder of salvation streaking toward them from the skies. Her arms ached, her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She imagined the pilots on the other end, adjusting their flight path, loading weapons, preparing to unleash hell on the ridges. All of it depended on her broken, bloodied voice. Bravo 2, hold tight, the radio crackled again. We've got you. The words wrapped around her like armor. For the first time since the ambush began, she believed they might survive. Still, the enemy hadn't relented. Fire poured down relentlessly, forcing soldiers to the ground, chipping away at their courage. Elena knew 7 minutes could mean dozens of bullets, dozens of lives. She kept transmitting, reassuring, begging, demanding, anything to fill the silence with certainty. As the seconds crawled by, her strength ebbed. Her vision darkened at the edges, her breaths shallow. She clung to consciousness with sheer stubbornness, refusing to collapse before the job was complete. She pressed the button one last time, voice a whisper but steady. Air support inbound. Hold on. Just hold on. The battlefield roared on, merciless and unending, but the tide had shifted. 40 soldiers clung to life, because one woman refused to quit even when shattered. Elena's body slumped against the pack, her cheek pressed to the cold metal. Her eyes fluttered shut, exhaustion dragging her down. But she smiled faintly, because she knew the call had gone through. And that call carried the weight of 40 lives. The valley trembled like a living beast beneath the roar of engines. At first, the soldiers thought it was another mortar strike, another wave of incoming death. But then the sound grew sharper, heavier, resonating from above, the unmistakable thunder of aircraft cutting through the sky. Every head snapped upward, eyes searching the smoke-choked heavens. Through gaps in the haze, twin silhouettes emerged, sleek fighter jets, streaking low over the ridgeline. Their afterburners blazed like twin suns, their arrival shaking the earth and rattling bones. For the men and women of Bravo 2, it was the sound of salvation. Air support! Someone shouted, voice breaking with relief. Elena, still pressed against the battered radio, forced her eyes open. Her vision swam, but she caught the faint gleam of wings slicing across the sky. She felt the vibration deep in her chest, as though the aircraft were pumping life back into her veins. She had done it. Her call had brought them. The enemy, too, realized what had come. Shouts echoed across the ridges, panicked voices in a foreign tongue. Fighters scrambled to retreat, abandoning their fortified nests, but it was too late. The jets roared past once, marking their targets. Then came the thunder. Missiles streaked from beneath their wings, trailing fire as they screamed toward the ridgeline. A heartbeat later, the mountainside erupted. Rock and earth burst skyward in a fiery plume, shock waves rolling across the valley like tidal waves. Enemy gunfire faltered instantly, silenced beneath the deafening roar of precision strikes. Cheers erupted from the soldiers below. For a moment, their exhaustion vanished, replaced by raw, unshakable hope. They rose from cover, firing with renewed ferocity, driving the enemy further into chaos. Elena clung to the pack, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. She wanted to scream with them, to shout victory into the sky, but her voice was too broken, her body too weak. Instead, she smiled through the haze, blood drying at the corners of her mouth. The jets circled again, unleashing another volley. The ridgeline shattered under the relentless assault, smoke and fire blotting out the once clear horizon. Enemy positions that had seemed unbreakable only minutes ago were reduced to rubble. But the aircraft weren't alone. Moments later, the steady thrum of helicopter blades joined the chorus. Black Hawks swept into the valley, their rotors chopping the smoke-filled air. Doors swung open mid-flight, gunners unleashing torrents of suppression fire into the retreating enemy. And from the bellies of those choppers, salvation descended. Ropes dropped, and soldiers slid down in disciplined formation reinforcements, fresh and fierce, hitting the ground like a hammer. Their boots thudded into the earth, their rifles already raised, their eyes burning with determination. The tide of battle had shifted. Lieutenant Harris, battered but unbroken, bellowed over the chaos. Push forward. Reinforcements on the ground drive them back. Bravo 2 surged with renewed strength, their broken line reforging under the protection of steel and air power. They advanced behind cover fire, bullets cutting down the last pockets of resistance. What had once felt like certain annihilation transformed into a desperate but winnable fight. Yet amidst the roar of victory, Elena's world grew quieter. Her vision dimmed, sounds muffled, as though she were sinking beneath water. She watched the reinforcements spread across the valley, sweeping through smoke and rubble, but her body refused to rise and join them. Her job was done. A shadow fell over her. One of the new arrivals dropped to his knees, his medic armband catching her fading gaze. "Sergeant Martinez?" He shouted, his voice sharp but steady. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck and cursed under his breath. She's alive. He yelled to others. I need evac now. Hands moved quickly, cutting away gear, checking wounds, lifting her onto a stretcher. Elena winced weakly, but didn't resist. Her world blurred into fragments. The medic's determined face, the swirl of smoke above, the thunder of jets passing overhead one last time. Her mind clung to a single thought, repeating it like a prayer. They're safe. They're safe. Nearby, Lieutenant Harris watched as she was carried toward a waiting Black Hawk. His jaw clenched, his eyes fierce with pride. He knew the truth that every soldier around him would soon know 40 lives had been saved by one woman's refusal to quit. The battlefield, once a tomb, was now a place of survival. Enemy fire dwindled into silence, replaced by the hum of rotor blades and the barked commands of U.S. forces securing the ground. Reinforcements had arrived. The battle was theirs. But for Elena Martinez, the fight was slipping away. Her stretcher lifted, swaying as soldiers rushed her toward the helicopter. The medic hovered above, shouting vitals into his headset, his words lost in the roar. Elena's head rolled to the side, her eyes catching one last glimpse of the valley floor, the place where she had crawled through hell and refused to die. Her lips moved, forming words too soft for anyone to hear. Worth it. Then the stretcher slid into the Black Hawk, and the doors slammed shut. Outside, the battle waned. Inside, Elena's war for survival had only just begun. The valley was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard of smoke, twisted steel, and silence. The echoes of gunfire had finally faded, leaving only the low thrum of Black Hawk rotors and the scattered moans of the wounded. Charred rock still smoked along the ridgeline, where airstrikes had torn enemy positions apart. The once lethal high ground was now nothing but rubble. For Bravo 2, survival felt surreal. They moved slowly, their bodies heavy with exhaustion and disbelief, checking each other's wounds, gathering the fallen. Their eyes darted constantly, as if expecting another wave of gunfire to erupt from the hills. But none came. The enemy was gone. Lieutenant Harris stood at the center of it all, his voice rough from hours of shouting. He barked orders to organize medevacs, count weapons, and secure the last perimeter. But inside, his thoughts were elsewhere. His gaze kept drifting to the Black Hawk, parked at the far end of the valley, its doors open, medics working frantically inside. Elena Martinez was in there. He had seen her carried across the battlefield, her body limp, but her face fierce even in unconsciousness. He had wanted to go with her, to thank her, to tell her she had done the impossible. But duty kept him rooted among his men, finishing the work she had given them the chance to complete. Now, with the valley secure, he finally allowed himself a breath and a whisper of pride. She saved us, he muttered. Every damn one of us. The soldiers nearby, battered and bleeding, nodded in solemn agreement. They knew the truth. Without her, Bravo 2 would have been nothing more than names etched into marble. Inside the helicopter, Elena drifted between darkness and light. The medic hovered over her, pressing bandages to her shredded legs, his voice steady but urgent. Stay with me, Sergeant. You hear me? You did your part now, let me do mine. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, her gaze fixed on him. Her lips parted, whispering something too faint to catch. Then she slipped back under, her chest rising and falling shallowly. The medic leaned closer, whispering as if she could still hear him. You're not done yet. Not by a long shot. Hours later, the battle site was cleared. Reinforcements had swept the ridges, confirming the enemy's retreat. The wounded were airlifted, the dead counted and covered with flags. The valley was quiet again, but it carried the weight of sacrifice. At the field hospital miles away, Helena lay in a sterile tent filled with the hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic. She was pale, her face drawn, but alive. Surgeons worked tirelessly to stabilize her, patching wounds, controlling the damage. Her legs mangled beyond recognition were the greatest concern. The verdict was grim. Lieutenant Harris arrived just as the surgeons finished their work. He stood at the edge of her cot, his uniform streaked with dirt and blood. He looked down at the woman who had saved his command, his throat tightening. "Sergeant Martinez," he said softly, "you stubborn, fearless soldier. You bought us our lives." Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with painkillers but aware. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. Harris leaned close, catching the faintest whisper. "Did they make it?" "All of them," he said firmly. 40 soldiers alive because of you. 40 families who'll see their loved ones again. You did that." Tears welled in her eyes. She wanted to smile, but the drugs and pain made it impossible. Instead, a single tear slid down her cheek. Harris reached out and squeezed her hand, his grip strong, steady. In the following days, the story of Bravo 2 spread like wildfire. The tale of the sergeant who crawled on shattered legs to reach a radio, who refused to quit until reinforcements arrived, was retold in every mess hall, every command briefing, every corner of the base. Soldiers who had been there spoke of her with reverence, their voices hushed but full of awe. "She's the reason I'm still breathing," one private said, tears in his eyes. I'll never forget that. Elena, confined to her cot, heard the stories trickle back to her. Visitors came constantly, soldiers she had saved, officers who wanted to shake her hand, medics who marveled at her endurance. She accepted their words quietly, though inside she wrestled with the reality of her condition. Her legs were gone. The surgeons had been clear. She would never walk again. That knowledge cut deeper than any wound. She had spent her life defined by strength, by movement, by the discipline of a soldier's body. Now, the thought of living without it threatened to break her spirit. But then she would remember the faces, the 40 men and women who had survived because she had crawled through hell. Their gratitude, their laughter, their tears when they visited her bedside, those were her new legs, her new strength. One evening, Harris visited again. He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, his eyes tired but burning with conviction. "I need you to understand something, Martinez," he said. "You didn't just save 40 soldiers. You reminded all of us what it means to fight, to never give in, no matter the cost." She looked at him, her voice weak but steady. "I just did my duty." "No," Harris said, shaking his head. "You did more than that. You gave us a reason to believe. And that doesn't end here." Elena's gaze drifted toward the tent's ceiling, where the faint outline of the canvas rippled in the breeze. Her body was broken, but her heart swelled with a strange, quiet pride. She had lost much, but she had given everything she had left, and it had been enough. The aftermath of battle left scars on everyone. But for Bravo 2, the deepest scar was tempered by survival, by the memory of one soldier who had refused to quit. In that valley, amidst fire and ruin, Elena Martinez had written herself into their lives forever. And though her war as a soldier in the field was over, another war, the war to rebuild, to rise again, was only just beginning. Months passed after the ambush, but the memory of that fateful day lingered in every corner of Elena Martinez's life. The valley, once a landscape of death and fire, existed now in the quiet corners of her mind, a permanent imprint. She had survived, but the battlefield had left its mark, both on her body and on her soul. Elena spent weeks in rehabilitation, learning to adapt to a life she had never imagined. Her legs, shattered beyond repair, would never carry her across terrain again. At first, the reality crushed her. She felt stripped of her identity, of the independence she had taken for granted. The discipline, the physicality, the very essence of a soldier's body all were gone. But slowly, determination replaced despair. Every morning, she practiced with prosthetics, strengthening her upper body, training her mind to control movements that once seemed automatic. Each small victory an inch gained in balance, a step mastered, was a triumph over both her injuries and the shadow of doubt that threatened to consume her. Her recovery was painful, but she approached it the way she had approached the battlefield, methodically, relentlessly, refusing to quit. Friends, fellow soldiers, and medical staff cheered each milestone, but she drew her strength from a different source. The memory of those 40 soldiers, alive because she had refused to stay down. Elena's story began to spread beyond the confines of the hospital. News outlets, military channels, and social media shared her courage. She became a symbol, not just of survival, but of unyielding willpower in the face of impossible odds. Soldiers across the country looked to her as a beacon, an example that heroism was not measured solely by victory, but by the courage to act when all seemed lost. At official ceremonies, medals were awarded. Awards were pinned to her uniform. But Elena's greatest pride wasn't in decorations or recognition. It was in the faces of those she had saved. Their gratitude and respect were more valuable than any honor she could receive. Every smile, every handshake, every tear of thanks reinforced the truth she had always known. Her actions had meaning far beyond herself. She began speaking to new recruits, sharing the story of that valley with cadets and soldiers. She described the terror of the ambush, the weight of responsibility, and the raw pain she endured. But more than that, she emphasized one truth above all: courage is a choice. You will face moments, she told them, voice steady, eyes burning with conviction, when giving up seems easier than going on, when your body screams at you to stop, when fear threatens to drown your mind. That is the moment that defines you. Not the battle itself, but the choice to refuse to quit. Her words resonated, and slowly, Elena found a new mission. She could no longer run across valleys or lead troops into the heat of combat, but she could shape the soldiers who would. She could inspire a generation to act with bravery and to place duty above fear. Her influence grew. Veteran organizations sought her out. Military academies invited her to lecture. Rehabilitation programs asked her to mentor others, helping soldiers adapt to life-altering injuries with the same resilience she had displayed. Every time she spoke, she carried the echoes of that day, the dirt, the blood, the heat, the fear, and the single unshakable determination to save lives. Through it all, she never forgot the valley or her squad. Reunions became sacred occasions, moments when soldiers who had survived because of her courage came together to honor both the past and the life she had given them. Laughter mixed with tears as they recounted moments of terror and heroism, remembering those who had fallen, celebrating those who survived, and forever etching Elena into the story of their lives. Her story inspired more than just the military. Civilians, too, read about her heroism, marveling at a woman who refused to give up despite overwhelming odds. She received letters from children, students, and ordinary citizens moved by her courage. They wrote about how her story encouraged them to persevere in school, work, or personal trials. Her impact rippled far beyond the battlefield, proving that one act of determination could ignite hope across countless lives. Elena herself reflected quietly on the paradox of her journey. She had faced the end and emerged alive, but at a cost that would forever alter her life. Yet, in that loss, she found purpose. Her shattered legs had confined her body, but they had liberated her will, allowing her to leave a legacy far greater than physical prowess could achieve. Years later, at a military hall filled with veterans, leaders, and young recruits, Elena stood to receive the nation's highest recognition for valor. The room was silent as her story was recounted. Every detail of the ambush, her crawl, and the single call that saved 40 lives. When applause erupted, it shook the hall. But Elena stood quietly, letting the honor wash over her, letting the gratitude of a nation remind her of the quiet truth she had always known. The real reward was survival and the chance to inspire others. She left the stage that day, her prosthetic legs carrying her steadily, head high. Outside, the sun glinted off the polished metal, but more importantly, it illuminated the path she had forged through courage, sacrifice, and indomitable spirit. Elena Martinez had faced death, refused to surrender, and emerged a living testament to the power of will. Her story endured, etched in the hearts of those she saved, the soldiers she trained, and the people she inspired. In every life touched by her courage, her legacy lived on, an enduring reminder that even in the darkest valleys, one person's determination can light the way for countless others. And for Elena, that truth was enough.